Welcome to Business Talk here on businesstech.co.za. I'm your host, Michael Avery, and today we're diving into a topic that has many of us shifting nervously in our seats: retirement. Yes, that moment when you're supposed to sit back and sip on pina coladas and watch sunsets. If only 90% of South Africans weren't struggling to afford it. That's right, a staggering majority of South Africans find themselves woefully unprepared for their golden years. And at this point, perhaps we should actually call them the bronze-plated years. But there's a new reform that everyone's been talking about, the two-pot system. I think we've heard quite a lot about it. We've seen a frenzy as cash-strapped South Africans have rushed to access their savings pots. Last I heard was some 22 billion rand from SARS and 1.2 million claims. But it's like splitting your finances between a sensible long-term savings for your retirement and a piggy bank that can occasionally break open. The question is, will it truly change the game? Or is it just giving us a fancier way to realize that we're still behind? Well, to help us make sense of this, I'm joined by two experts from Nedbank. Bridget Nkandu is an executive for strategy and new business development for consumer banking, and Dr. Frank Magwegwe, who is executive of financial wellness and advisory. So let's dive into it. So welcome to the show, both Bridget and Dr. Frank.
Thank you, Michael.
You can kick us off here, Dr. Frank, because it's an unfortunate but accurate statistic that 90% of South Africans cannot afford to retire. 9 out of 10. To start, what does it actually mean to be able to afford to retire?
I think in very simple terms, Michael, your introduction put it out so beautifully, right? That we are supposed to be out there on the beach, we're supposed to be traveling, we're supposed to be having fun. The reality is, you say 9 in 10 people don't. But sometimes when you just say don't, it doesn't quite paint the picture. What does that mean? We're saying, Michael, that it means 9 in 10 South Africans, the moment they hit retirement, they are no longer able to maintain the same standard of living as they did when they were working. Remember, what does retirement mean? It means, ching ching, payday, it's gone. That money is no longer available. From that moment, what we are saying as Nedbank is 9 in 10 South African means they now need to be careful about their expenses, whether it's healthcare expenses, whether it's grocery, whether it's traveling, any expenses that they were, whilst they were working, quite comfortable, they didn't think a lot about. They now need to think so carefully about, because the income coming from a retirement annuity or a living annuity or any other product that they settled for is no longer adequate to meet their need. That is the reality.
And it's a sad reality that we really need, all of us, I think, to try and shift and change that number, because it's been around about that number for as long as I've been talking about retirement for the last 2 decades. Bridget, to bring you in, is it more of a matter of inadequate savings? Is it poor financial planning? Is it just the high cost of living? What do you see as the key factors that are causing most South Africans not to be ready to retire?
Yeah, so thanks. Great question. And for me, I think the way we look at it, all those aspects that you speak about are key. I think the reality that we find ourselves in is that majority of South Africans have not saved enough, right? They have not saved enough. And you also quoted and mentioned, 90% of South Africans are falling short, which means that majority, by the time that they retire, they will run out of money. Okay, so I think that is the situation we find ourselves in, and there's a lot of impact around it. So a lot of things also hinge around the ability to save enough while you are still working before retirement, and majority have failed to hit that. And also other impacts around inflation. So if you think about inflation, so inflation also does impact, it reduces the value of money. And because it reduces the value of money, what it means is that the purchasing power of the savings that you have also decreases. So I think it's a combination of a lot of things. You haven't saved enough. you are saving and you're also hit with the impact of inflation. And also, and I think if we think about, for example, from a senior's perspective, what is the key component or key cost, high cost of healthcare? That is an impact. And we do know that the cost of healthcare generally, rises faster than the general inflation. So what that means is also you have saved, or if you do not have enough saved towards emergencies, that the money that's going towards your healthcare starts also eroding the savings that you have. So it's a combination of a lot of things.
Yeah, and as you talk, I'm thinking of the sandwich generation. I'm looking after my mum after my dad passed away. All of his retirement savings were in a business, and that went belly up. He was stabbed in the back. It's a long story, but anyway, I mean, that's the situation I'm living in. There's black tax. There's all of these other things as well. That makes it a challenge. It's not an easy problem to solve. But here we've got, and Dr. Frank, I mean, maybe you can come in on this point. We've got this reform, the two-pot system, and it's really about ensuring that we can address South Africa's retirement crisis. In what ways do you see it solving the crisis? And how does it fit into Nedbank's broader strategy for addressing retirement readiness?
That's such an interesting question. Before I answer that, I just want to go back to the example of the sandwich generation that you gave, right? To say people don't set out not to have enough money. And we're hinting on that, Michael. They don't set out not to have enough money. What happens is the picture you've painted of perhaps I have extended family that I need to support, or other things happen. I venture out in starting out a business in retirement. It doesn't work out. I relocate. Bridget talked on inflation. So there's a number of factors that come into play, and boom, ultimately someone finds themselves struggling. Another reason, perhaps, Michael, is also the idea that people don't often know, and maybe who have it, I have no doubt in this conversation, the role of financial advisors. People don't often know what's enough, but let's park there. We can come back to that. Coming back to your specific question, retirement reform. What does it mean for us at Nedbank, firstly? And what does it mean for South Africans? The interesting thing is this, quite sadly, for us at Nedbank is the following, Michael, is that a lot of the media, a lot of the commentary has been around the two-pot in the context of the savings pot that I can go and get my money. And we had SARS giving us the numbers. I think about 2 weeks ago, we're talking at 21 billion, and roughly 1 million South Africans had accessed their savings pocket. Old Mutual came up with a number on Thursday or Friday. So, I mean, the numbers are staggering. They have been way beyond even the big numbers of people who were saying this will be a problem, right? And so, whilst the focus has been on that, we actually have missed the beauty. We have missed what the two-pot is trying to solve for. So it's trying to solve for what we have seen in the news a lot, the fact that South Africans do go through financial emergencies, financial challenges, financial difficulties, and they find themselves needing to access money from their retirement savings. So if you look at what the two-pot has done now, it has said, no worries. Should you want money, it's okay. You have a savings pot. You can go and get it from there. But wait a minute. You are now accessing it before retirement. And therefore, I, as SARS, will treat it as normal income, and I'm going to charge you or tax you at your marginal rate. And people have been, it's unfair. Why are they doing this? And right, that part. But what have we lost? We believe as Nedbank, we're losing the dialogue around. Remember, when people didn't have access to the savings pot, what did they do? They retired to access it. They changed jobs to access it. They applied for early retirement, for example. So there were a lot of behavior that was not good for the long term just to get the money. I will look for another job. I want my money. So this has stopped that. This is amazing for retirement reform in South Africa. The fact that now anyone from the 1st of September, you don't need to retire from your job. Should you want the money, you've got this means to access it. Let's look in the long end now. What does that mean? That means people who were who were changing jobs to access their retirement savings, They can no longer do that. They can only access what's in the pocket, in the savings pocket, which means we will have working South Africans with higher savings in retirement because you no longer can access 100%. Before, you could access your 100% when you change jobs. So that's the beauty of it. And I've seen some numbers from insurance companies, be it the likes of Old Mutual, be it Nedbank, even from our own colleagues at Net Group Investment. There is consensus, Michael, that a person starting working from the 1st of September, 20 years from today, they will have more or should have more retirement savings than a person in the old dispensation. And therefore, that's the exciting part. And as I said, it's interesting that we're not getting enough reporting on that. Good for the retirement system in SA in the long term. We should see that 9 in 10 definitely pulling back because of the retirement reform system.
Very good point. Very good point. Bridget, would you like to add on that? Because I think they call it in the industry preservation. And you know, we've been very poor at preserving our funds. Now you have a mandatory 2/3 preservation.
Exactly.
Correct.
Yes. And I actually just wanted to add on, and I think beautifully put, Dr. Frank, there. I just feel like the two-pot retirement system is really designed to help individuals balance their long-term savings with their need for short-term funds. Make it actually easier to achieve realistic financial goals. I think that's really the big advantage about it. And even how it's designed, you notice that the savings pot allows you for a third. So you can access a third from it. And then allows you then to have a more, retirement pot that kind of, the contribution that you make to it is 2/3, all right? 2/3 of your new retirement contribution go to this pot. So what really I feel the two-pot system gives is really, first of all, flexibility. The savings pot provides safety for unexpected expenses. It encourages, savings by just automatically allocating a portion of your contributions to the retirement pot. The system promotes disciplined savings for the future, which is really amazing. And I think ultimately there's financial security because the retirement pot will ensure that a substantial amount of your savings is preserved for retirement, really helping you to have that financial secure future. So I think the design of it really does help to support, financial security.
A great point, Bridget. What I like as a financial journalist, been talking about this for 2 decades. Retirement is a very difficult thing to talk about with people. They want to talk about how do I save for that shiny new car? How do I save for the first home? That people struggle to project 20, 30, 40 years out into the future. But what the system does, and really what I think is an exceptional design element, is it opens up an annual conversation with yourself as a retirement saver, with your employer, maybe a retirement benefits counsel or a financial planner in the mix there to say, right, what are you going to do this year? Are you going to touch it? Are you going to leave it? Where's your financial plan? Let's dust that off. Are you on track? I think that communication is so key. Dr. Frank, how can we leverage this to better educate South Africans about their retirement planning, as well as the ways that the two-pot systems can help at the end of the day?
It's like you read my mind, Michael, because as we're speaking, you made me realize that another myth that we must bust, is it myth busting? We're doing a little bit of, retirement savings myth busting here, is exactly where you're leading us to, Michael. A conversation between the individual and the financial planner to say, where are you, what's happening? And I see in that conversation, Michael, a discussion that says, by the way, remember, you do not need to access your savings pot. Remember, it's not mandatory. You are not required to. It is only there in the event of an emergency. It's not there for you to take every year and spend. And so I see a discussion, as you beautifully put it, Michael, with the financial planner saying, let us look at the emergencies that you had last year. Let us look at what made you to access your savings pot. Let's plan better this year. Maybe we aim to build more on the emergency savings, your own funds, so that you don't access the savings pot. And therefore, what happens when you don't do that? One, your money is invested for longer and you have this additional money when you get to retirement. 2, you are not penalized by accessing the money and being taxed at the marginal tax rate. So it really is bringing that dialogue, to the fore. And I think an additional benefit for me, Michael, you said something so powerful when you said it's difficult to project yourself 30 years away. Now, you can see a little bit of gray beard here. Guys, I'm 52. I vividly remember when I was 35. How do I know? Because I know I joined Alexander Forbes at 35 as head of sales and marketing. I even remember, Michael, pinstripe suit I was wearing, a pink tie I was wearing, and they showed me this big office. I felt I had arrived. But this is 17 years later. I'm 52 now, right? And if you told me about retirement when I had this shiny big office, sales and marketing direct, I would have thought, wait a minute, let's not talk about that. It's so far away. And so what you have offered us in this conversation, Michael, is psychology. Is that in addition to encouraging people to put money aside for retirement, what we also need to know is that by design, the way society is structured, the way human beings respond to adverts out there, they all about instant gratification. Get the new phone now. Get the new whatever. You can complete the sentence today. So it's very difficult to plan for long term. And so our messages must not only be intellectual messages around 9 in 10 South Africans do not retire. Why? Because to me, I say, good for them. I am 1 in 10. I'm not going to be that 9 in 10. That's how the brain works. So we need to say, remember, you are getting old. Exactly your Bridget's point. As you get older, you are going to have, unless you really special, for most of us, you'll have more medical needs. It will mean you may struggle with the increasing medical aid premium. We really make it, you want to spend more time with your grandkids. But when you haven't done that, it means before. So we really need messages that break it down into practical thing. And you know why I say that, Michael? The human brain doesn't like a loss. When I say you will not have enough time to spend with your grandkids because of financial stress, you will not have enough time to travel because the brain doesn't like a loss. So when you prepare a message or when you present a message about losing, it grabs more attention than just 9 in 10. So I think we can really package messages around financial planning, around ongoing dialogue every year, around building emergency savings. Don't think it's compulsory to use this savings pot. And so I really think it's fantastic retirement reform for our country to make sure that 20, 30 years from now, we'll really be talking a much lower number of people, who knows, maybe 5 in 10. That would be fantastic if we can achieve that.
That would be remarkable, because if you zoom out and you put your macroeconomist hat on, you're then saying, well, we're deepening financial inclusion, we're deepening our national savings. That's good for broader economic growth, which then cascades into more opportunities, more job creation, more societal cohesion, all of those good things, just because we started thinking at the individual level a little differently about that marshmallow, the old marshmallow test. They put the toddlers in the room and they said, well, leave one there, but if you can leave it for 5 minutes, we'll give you 2. And most of the toddlers just couldn't do it. Now, whereas adults, we struggle with that. We struggle with that concept of just squirreling away because we want to have everything now. But at least we can have that conversation. Are there negatives? I don't know if either of you want to weigh in on this one.
Yeah.
Do you see any negative impacts that the system could potentially have on South Africa's retirement culture?
Do you want to take that, Bridget, or should I give it a step?
No, you can give it a step.
So I think for me, the negative is around messaging. Let me give you an example, Michael. So about 2 weeks ago, I was having a dialogue with an exec at a mining company. And I just was joking and saying, by the way, how is Two-Pot going? And says, please don't remind me about that. I said, what do you mean? It looks like it frustrates you, the fact that I'm asking. He says the amount of miscommunication, it's just one site of this. It's a large South African coal mining company. They have about 7,000 employees. Guess what, Michael? 4,000 as 2 weeks ago had already accessed their savings portion, right? Their savings pot. So I asked this lady, exec for HR, I say, how did that come about? And he said there is still miscommunication. That is saying, if you don't, the government might take that money away for you. You might no longer be able to access your savings pot. And so I think the negative is around we think we have communicated. But for me, this example, and when I say we, all stakeholders, you included as a financial journalist, us as Nedbank, the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, really all role players, right? We think we have communicated, but that example showed me, despite a lot of training that were offered to these employees, there was fear that you have to get it. If you don't, it's going to go away. So I think more work needs to be done so that we don't have people every year going and thinking, well, if I don't take it, it will disappear. Let me take the one that I'm allied to. Then that's a negative, because it will then defeat the purpose of there is a flexibility. If you have an emergency, go and get it. But if you don't, keep it there. I think that's one part. I think the other part for me, that's again kind of related to communication. I think, and we play a role as Nedbank there and other players also, is the following thing. It's the fact that consumers, all of us, often don't realize how it's very difficult for people to understand percentages. And why am I going there, Michael? I'm linking it with communication, because often when you say to someone, you took your savings pot, it means you are now missing the growth that the 2/3 is going to get until retirement. And someone says, but it's only 1/3. How big can it be? Not realizing that, getting 2% from wherever it's invested per year for 20 years is huge. And so I think, coupled with not necessarily saying people, discouraging them if they have emergencies to access their money, but really simple calculators, like SARS put a beautiful little calculator, but it was only around the tax rate to say, if you are in this bracket, this. So I'm having this picture, Michael. I'm just thinking of it now in the dialogue we're having. We need a calculator that says, should you withdraw, this is the compound growth you are missing to the end. And then because the human brain is wired for gains, not losses, like, wait a minute, this might be a little bit more. So I think it's more around communication, around just helping people realize it's not compulsory, around busting the myth that if you don't use it, someone will, almost like the government will take that money away. It will no longer be available. It will be every single year.
Yeah. And while you're speaking, Dr. Frank, I think for me, really, I think while the new reform, like the 2-pot and are steps in the right direction, it really feels to me there's still a lot of work to be done to ensure South Africans can enjoy secure and dignified retirement. So I think really continuous efforts to improve, pension adequacy coverage, financial literacy are really key to, to ensuring that customers and, consumers really fully understand what's at stake. And I really like the view of saying, I think in a lot of components, there's the 1/3, 2/3. Sean, every consumers are really stuck to, there's just a 2,000 that I'm collecting. I think that compounded view would really help to say, look, if you left your money here, this is how much you would get eventually. And I think also, besides, showing the view of what you forgo, should you get your money now, I think what's really also important is diving deeper, because I think the issues or the emergencies are also a reality. So I think being clear and supportive to consumers in terms of what are the best things to spend this money on and what are the no-nos, I think then you understand to say, if I cash out, it should be a way that is really helping, yes, me deal this immediate need, but it does not compromise my long-term, investment, or it actually probably invests in a side hustle that gives me more money to, and then I'm able to actually start contributing even more. So I think a lot really hinges on that financial literacy. Educating
and
them on
Michael,
all the key components.
What comes to mind for me, I just want to build on that, then I will come to you, Mike, is this idea that I saw it's called a meme. Is it a meme? Those things you see on X Space, right? One of the saddest I've seen, but the individual actually doesn't realize. they say debt-free, right? And how do they go debt-free? They cashed in, sorry, they didn't cash in, they accessed their the savings pot, right, at marginal tax rate, and they went and they paid tax. And how did they achieve it? Company employer allows you to get your savings pot, retirement annuity allows you, preservation fund. So access 3 at marginal tax rate and paid off debt of all things to do. So your example, Bridget, around also the knowledge of what makes sense to use this money for is so critical. I just thought, let me build on that, Mike. I'm sorry about that.
Absolutely. And to your point, I think there's been a lot of stretching of the definition of what is an emergency. Certainly not to buy the latest 50-inch flat screen TV.
Yes.
You know, to understand what really is an emergency. Maybe if you're in a usurious debt situation with a mashonisa, but certainly not to pay down credit card debt, for example. They're better tools. But again, it comes back down to financial advice. You recently ran as Nedbank, Bridget, an awareness campaign highlighting some of these alarming stats about retirement planning in South Africa. Could you talk us through some of the biggest findings and maybe what surprised you most?
I think what surprised most, and really it's just kind of that realization and confirmation around majority of individuals not having saved enough for retirement. I think it's one thing hearing about it and reading about it, but I think when you dive deeper into the details or engaging customers, and it kind of just hits you. And also one of the key highlights that came out is around how much of consumers' money is tied to debt obligations. And also how much, I think in a few days, 80% of income, that customers get is already lapses. So that already kind of gives you a light bulb moment that there is actually then not enough money to put aside to save. Because when you now, sit down and you're having a conversation with a consumer and your encouragement is around save money. But when you're looking at the reality, you're finding that actually there's not enough, there's nothing to save.
There's always more month left at the end of my money.
Exactly. Exactly.
But so what do we do, Dr. Frank? I mean, if you know, and I think often we talk about this, and sometimes consumers, South Africans, can feel a little bit paralyzed. Paralysis analysis as we call it. But you've got to start. If you're behind and you don't know where to start, how to just take the first step, what advice do you have for helping people just take that first step so that they can catch up to where they should be? Because they always say the best time to start was what? 10, 20, 30 years ago. The next best time is today. So what are some of the practical steps that they can take today?
And they are indeed there. That is really the beauty, Michael. So if I think about the 2 points that Bridget brought out in our research on seniors and just retirement, I think for me, the idea that some people don't know what is adequate. They haven't really thought about it. They don't know there's calculation and projection that can be done. That is the first thing. Then also Bridget's point, then I'll build on those, the idea of debt, that ideally we should be reducing debt in our 50s so that we are freeing up that money that will come through a living annuity or retirement annuity once we have retired, really for maintaining our lifestyle. So if I build on those 2, and I'm going to start with the reality, Michael, that a lot of our South Africans face is this. We currently have a huge challenge of over-indebtedness, right? Lots of people are just struggling with the amount of debt that they are carrying. Why is that a problem when someone is sitting today in their 50s like me and you are thinking about retirement and I haven't started? The problem is when you are carrying a lot of debt, it comes with a psychological burden. So what happens is there's an underlying little bit of a stress. It differs from person to person, but I'm sure we would agree, the 3 of us, that there's just something around, I would like to pay off debt. I'd like to be debt-free. I don't want to owe anyone. And so this idea of carrying a lot of debt in your 50s, especially for people who don't work with a financial planner, it misleads individuals. So my first piece of advice is, please don't be tempted into wanting to be debt-free as fast as you can in your 50s, whilst you know you haven't done enough preparation for retirement. Because let's picture what's happening. Well, you'll be debt-free in 4 years' time, but you don't have savings for retirement. So you really need advice from a good financial planner to say, it is important to reduce, but how can we use the disposable income between reducing debt and which debt? Credit card, car loan, home loan, versus making sure we're putting this, it needs time in the market to grow, right? So doing something around debt, but don't just run as an individual in your 50s alone and think you'll be able to kind of figure out how to reduce debt and still be able to put money aside for retirement. That's my one thing. But the underlying message, we should, reduce debt as we go into retirement. The other one is retirement calculations are complex. We don't want our seniors to be worrying about, kind of taking the calculator, forecasting medical inflation. Will I be in Gauteng or will I be sort of in a rural type of town? And, what is the cost of living? We don't want them to do that. The way to avoid having to think about all those is to work with a financial planner. I'm a certified financial planner myself. Every quarter, I meet my own financial planner. Why? Because I'm too emotionally involved with my own retirement. I need a person who's a little bit far to say, this is what you're doing, you're on track or you're not, right? So working with a financial planner to kind of come up with a plan around, this is where you are. We want to get you here. Let's work out how we can get there. Then my third, perhaps most important, is this, Michael. I think you and I and Bridget would be lying to our seniors if we say, you in your 50s, you realize you're not quite where you should be, as we found out in the research that my colleague here, Bridget, did with their team, right? When you realize you're not there, we need to be honest with you and say to you, you need to look into your current financial behaviors. You need to adjust. There are some areas where you need to say, I need to stop this and that to make sure that I have a bit of a plan to put more towards retirement because I left it a little bit late. You can't continue the way you have continued, right? And think you also have an okay retirement. And so, and it differs from each individual to say, what are you going to stop? But each individual has to relook their lifestyle. They have to relook their financial life and be realistic around their financial behavior. This will have to go. And I'm just going to give a silly example. So, for example, for some people, kind of relaxation, going away on holiday, it's got a lot of, I've worked hard, I earned it, I deserve it, I need a break. Maybe for me, I would say, you might need to do a little bit more short-lived, perhaps, versus an international holiday. I'm just giving those little. If you go out, and I know going out, it's not just about the food, it's also kind of the social, elements of it. Maybe if you do it every month, we might need to say, let's do it twice, and whatever those savings are, they need to go towards retirement because I started a little bit late. So we also need to be honest on kind of how they can go about it, Michael.
Yeah, but that all starts, to your earlier point, with having a good financial plan. And that all starts with a financial planner. I'm a financial journalist. I've got a financial planner because, to your point, you need an objective view, someone who's dispassionate. And I don't mind paying for the service because I get it back tenfold. And I go to a CFP. I go to someone who's got a designation, who's a professional. I wouldn't go to a doctor in an alleyway somewhere for my health. And I don't know why people would be any different with their financial well-being. So just start there, I think, is a great bit of advice. Just lastly, and maybe Bridget, you can end off for us. Employers here, and I know that we've shifted from the DB to the DC, defined benefit to defined contribution. I don't want to confuse people, but it was an old system where employers were quite paternalistic and they guaranteed what you'd get, to a new system where a lot of the risk was then shifted onto us as individuals, as employees. There's an opportunity again here, I think, for the employer to step up and play maybe a bit more of a proactive role. I'm not saying go back and be as paternalistic as it was in the past, but how can employers use this two-pot system to help their employees plan better for retirement? Because if they do, you're talking about, a more engaged employee, more productive, a better social cohesion, all of those good things. So there is a big opportunity here for employers.
Yeah. So, I do think companies and employers do really play a crucial role in really helping employees save for retirement. And I do think that employers can do a lot of things. For example, match contributions. So employers, often match, a percent of employees' contributions for their retirement. For example, an employer, might match 50% of the employee's contribution up to 66% of their salary. Another area employers can help is probably in the non-elective, contribution. So some employers contribute a fixed amount to employee retirement accounts, regardless of whether the employee makes their contribution. That is also kind of, a component or a benefit that can come from employers. The other component can be around, profit sharing contributions. So employers may share a portion of their profits with employees by contributing to their retirement accounts. And I think Dr. Frank touched on it, and also this also falls in his space. I think a big component from employers is really around financial wellness programs.
Absolutely.
So what
If I can build, so Bridget,
exactly.
I think, so for me, that would be just one thing. You're so right, Bridget. I agree with all that you have said. And because financial literacy is still low and we struggle with projecting ourselves in the future in retirement, I think proactive financial wellness programs that are structured by, I almost want to say by age bands. In other words, older people, we know they've established financial behaviors and it might be a little bit to shift those behaviors. But so I have a program for them. Almost 5 years from retirement, this is what I'm doing. Then almost kind of, those in the middle. Then I do a lot on the younger people, age induction, making sure people open their benefit statements, making sure they choose the appropriate funds. I've come across people who didn't know. For 15 years, their option was a money market fund. And the company didn't proactively say anything about it. And this was a young person, for example. So I think education still plays, a bigger role. My closing part, and I know you've reported on this, Michael, is the pleasing announcements that are coming out from corporates in South Africa who are acknowledging that the cost of living is quite high. And we have seen many corporates setting a new minimum salary for their employees. Say, we don't care what you do. You are a receptionist or you are in the mail room. We have come up with this minimum because we just want to make sure that, you can at least take enough to manage your day-to-day affairs. If we have more of that by employers, what does that do? It means the employees have a little bit more that they can put towards retirement, because often the reason they elect lower contribution is to have higher pay, a higher take-home pay. So it's pleasing for me to really see a number of corporates over the last several months that have come in, some at 16.5, some at 21. I think we need more of that from corporates, and it's an indirect benefit for workers' retirement pots.
Yeah. And I think on that financial wellness, I think a key component, and you mentioned Dr. Frank, is really that access to financial advisors. So really providing access to financial advisors can really help employees create that personalized retirement plan and make investment and make well-informed investment decisions. And I think outside financial wellness is really around flexible savings options. So really from corporates or even from a bank perspective like Nedbank, being very clear on emergency savings fund. What do customers invest in for emergency savings? On-demand pay. Employers can provide on-demand pay options, allowing employees to access their end wages before regular payday, which can help them manage their cash flow and reduce, financial stress. And I think also ensuring that especially from a bank perspective, that you are the first stop with a financial planner, they can actually guide you and also understand. For example, we talked about debt as a challenge or something that our customers are living with. How do you as an organization, Nedbank, help a customer, for example, consolidate their current debt? So instead of going to a mashonisa or getting further debt at high interest rate, a bank can consolidate your debt, allow you to pay, lower rates and manage, so that actually in doing that, it allows you to deal your immediate obligations, and also you start saving more, put away more towards your saving. And we do encourage that, at least about 20%, put away about 20%, towards your savings. So I think just in a nutshell, a lot that, corporates can do and are actually doing at the moment.
Well, that's a lot to think about as well as we continue to chase those elusive golden years. Thanks so much, Bridget and Dr. Frank, for great insights today. I think really passionate about this whole retirement reform journey that we're on as a country. And to our listeners, let's hope we made that light at the end of the retirement tunnel just a little bit brighter, or at least less like an oncoming train. Stay tuned for more on Business Talk with me, Michael Avery.